When one is facing tests of humility, this is an opportunity to grow beyond the mind and to move into the heart. And many that walk the narrow path, the middle path, that are on the path to enlightenment, to truth, will find themselves in this position more than once. And it happens to be around Christmas time. And we are still closing out cycles. We are at the end of that, of the old life. And what this allows us to do when we are able to expand our heart beyond the mind is this allows us to move freely in and out of our dreams, in and out of our past life, into the next life, into the afterlife. This is how we move freely through our dreams and in spirit when we are not blocked by our thoughts and our beliefs. And a lot of the test right now is about being able to move through changes in and everything that's going on in our personal life and in the world without being disturbed, without it touching you, without it touching anything that's going on, affecting you, but without dissociating. Of course, there's a difference between dissociating and not being, you know, negatively affected or impacted by changes in the external world. This world truly is a dream. And every time there is, that we are being tested or there is something, what seems bad happening or humiliation, and we react because we see it's not right or we know we're not being respected. This is an opportunity to truly, truly grow beyond that. And this has been something that has been coming up a lot, especially in this Christmas season for many. And there are many who have never had loving family and friends and that environment to experience the holidays in. So there's a separate message for that, but you know, I'm not really going to get into that right now, but the holidays around Christmas time are not under the reign of truth. So if you did not get that love and that family and those experiences ever, some people have just never had that. This is because you were not under that reign. Okay, so I can feel this so spread out through the collective. Like, how can the world do what they do and get away with it? Another note that's coming up is only knowing what you need to know, not seeking more. This is a lot about how the path to enlightenment can be dangerous. And this is also another way we can disassociate from the world, seeking information or, more, anything more than what is right in front of us and right now. Many go very far, even to sell themselves out a bit for more information, seeking something, anything. And this can also be things like food and lust, of course, but this is also information about the world, about a person, about your journey, about your purpose, when everything that we need to know is presented to us when we need to know it. And I felt called to open up my book. It is The Teachings of Buddha. What I got called to in this tonight was very relevant, but I also want to bring up a testimony that I watched today of a man. I'm not sure his name right now. I think this got pretty well known, but it was my first time hearing about it, who had been arrested in another country for spreading the teachings of Jesus, and how he was, met Jesus as a child and or much younger, throwing rocks or something. I'll have to look up again his name and write it in. So when I was watching this, he also mentioned something about opening up the Bible for a message, which I did because he said that, and I do that anyways too. And what I was led to was also relevant to this, but this is about being able to move in the world into any area, any place, any situation that one is called to go, regardless of what it looks like or not knowing what's going to happen, and to trust that you are being led in every area and any area that you are called to go, that you're listening, of course, that you are called to go. And this has also led me to the 12 rules of humility. This is St. Benedict's 5th century guide to humility. The 12 steps are: 1, fear of God; 2, self-denial; 3, obedience. This, of course, goes along with caring what people think. And the 4th is perseverance. The 5th is repentance. 6 is serenity, self-abasement, prudence, silence, dignity, discretion, and reverence. So firsthand, the first paragraph I'm going to read in this book says, therefore, people should first discern what is of the first importance, what problem should first be solved, what is the most pressing issue for them. To do all this, they must first undertake to train their minds. That is, they must first seek mind control. And I know I keep jumping around, or I might, but this is also about giving. So let me put that down first to make this a little more organized. We are talking about enlightenment and giving in the name of truth. So since it is around Christmas time, one of my tea notes says, it has quotes on it, was along the lines of, gratitude is not about receiving, it is about receiving what is there. Now, in this video I was watching earlier, he was called to go to this country, and then he wound up in a prison. They took his passport. He didn't know why. They just said, oh, no worries, go down to this place. We had to send your passport over, even though they were getting on the bus or train to leave or something. And they were done there. They spent their 2 weeks. They were going to leave. They sent their passport away. And when they got there, they were like, oh, yeah, come with us down here. And then they ended up beating them and saying that they're going to prison. And they beat this man and the person he was with every day. And then Jesus told him that he would be there for 9 weeks. But of course, in that period of time, he had a lot of doubts. He had no idea if he would be there forever. He was being beaten every day. He couldn't shower. And he ended up making friends, or told the man who was beating him one day that to shake his hand and that they would be friends. And he was like, I'm not your friend. And then he said, no, you are my friend. I want you to shake my hand or something. So that man stopped coming in to beat him every day, but he could feel the love of Christ in him, basically. And then he wound up in court to leave one day, but there was purpose served in this. And, there are many different ways that humility shows up. And another paragraph I want to read in this book, but about that was what Jesus was telling him when this man was beating him. Also, was, you know, this man that's beating you every day does not know that I love him. So basically, the people that are treating others this way and that are abusing others do not oftentimes know that they are loved. They do not know that. And sometimes we, wind up in positions and with people that it is not about extending our hand to the enemy. Well, it is in that sense to shake his hand, right? I think it's important to understand with humility the situations that we've been led to go into versus the ones that we have chose ourselves, and also to understand that in the big picture, in God's eyes, it is different than how we see it. To walk like Christ is to know that everyone is loved. This is truly about giving and not receiving. This part of this chapter says, those who really seek the path to enlightenment dictate terms to the mind. Then they proceed with strong determination. Even though they are abused by some and scorned by others, they go forward with an undisturbed mind. They do not become angry if they are beaten by fists or hit by stones or gashed by swords. So this is also about, the teachings that are being given. If you are sharing your wisdom and knowledge and information, regardless of what other people say. And of course, in our close and personal lives, it says, even if the enemies saw off the head from the body, the mind must not be disturbed. If they let their mind become darkened by the things they suffer, they are not following the teaching of Buddha. They must be determined, no matter what happens to them, to remain steadfast, unmovable, ever radiating thoughts of compassion and goodwill. Let abuse come, let misfortune come, and yet no one should resolve to remain unmoved and tranquil in mind, filled with Buddha's teaching. If you have seen the movie Inception, it is about moving from one dream into the next, and more, of course. Now, when we build a structure, we build an environment, a life, an idea, a business, something, a relationship. When we build these and they crumble in time, it can feel like we are dealing with loss. It can feel humiliating when you are looking at what's going on in the world. But every time we experience these falls, if that's what you want to call it, when the structures are breaking down, it is to move into the next dream. But there's one constant, maybe more than one, but there's always going to be one constant, and that is you. That is, you are the seed. So if the seed has flowers or petals and leaves, and the petals are plucked and the whole thing crumbles, you will still blow with the wind into the next dream. You are the constant, regardless of anything that crumbles around you. This is really, really something that we all need to understand, especially those of us who have never had stable foundations. This is about building those roots within one's soul, within one's self, within your beliefs of who you are, within your faith because you are the seed. We are all a piece of consciousness, of one consciousness in each body, and that never, ever dies. The body might disintegrate when it's time, but the consciousness does not. It continues to move on. So, if it is at the end of a life cycle, or at the end of a daily cycle, or at the end of a season and period of time of life, a relationship cycle, when those structures fall, it is what you have evolved and gained within that is going to carry on. And now that you know what wasn't working with those structures that were built in this current cycle, you can use that knowledge and wisdom and information to rebuild the next one. Some will have many, many, many structures fall continuously. Many of us have had considerable, I mean, relentless, periods of transition within this one lifetime. And we transition every night when we sleep, or every time when that is. So there's, transition on a big scale and on a little scale. But when we are hanging on to ideas that we think should be standing, but they're crumbling, or we're focused on what's not important, this can really deter us and, hold us back from moving into that next cycle, moving into that next dream freely and happy to do so. I'm going to read more. This says, "Oh, my mind, once you caused me to be born as a king, and then you caused me to be born as an outcast and to beg for my food. Sometimes you caused me to be born in heavenly mansions of the gods and to dwell in luxury and in ecstasy. Then you plunged me into the flames of hell. Oh, my foolish, foolish mind. Thus you have led me along different paths, and I have been obedient to you and docile. But now that I have heard the Buddha's teaching, do not disturb me anymore or cause me further sufferings, but let us seek enlightenment together, humbly and patiently. Oh, my mind, if only you could learn that everything is non-substantial and transitory. If you could only learn not to grasp after things, not to covet things, not to give way to greed, anger, and foolishness, then we might journey in quietness. Then, by severing the bond of desires with the sword of wisdom, being undisturbed by changing circumstances, advantage or disadvantage, good or bad, loss or gain, praise or abuse, we might dwell in peace. Oh, my dear mind, it was you who first awakened faith in us. It was you who suggested our seeking enlightenment. Why do you give way so easily to greed, love, and comfort, and pleasant excitement again? Oh, my mind, why do you rush hither and thither with no definite purpose? Let us cross this wild sea of delusion. Hitherto I have acted as you wish, but now you must act as I wish, and together we will follow the Buddha's teaching." This is about commanding your mind. Oh, my dear mind, these mountain rivers and seas are changeable and pain producing. Where in this world of delusion shall we seek quietness? Let us follow the Buddha's teaching and cross over to the other shore of enlightenment. Those who really seek the path to enlightenment dictate terms to the mind. Then they proceed with strong determination. Even though they are abused by some and scorned by others, they go forward with an undisturbed mind. They do not become angry if they are beaten by fists or hit by stones or gashed by swords. Even if the enemy saw off the head from the body, the mind must not be disturbed. If they let their mind become darkened by the things they suffer, they are not following the teaching of the Buddha. They must be determined, no matter what happens to them, to remain steadfast, unmovable, ever radiating thoughts of compassion and goodwill. Let abuse come, let misfortune come, and yet one should resolve to remain unmoved and tranquil in mind, filled with Buddha's teaching. Then it proceeds to go on about, you know, enduring the endurable, to gain enlightenment and, limit food and eat only, what is needed type of thing. If the path to enlightenment leads me through fire, I will go forward. But one must not do these things for any ulterior purpose. And this is the same, this goes along with the giving as well. Many know, especially if you have ever been around narcs, that, you know, those that want to give gifts or do something because they expect something in return. And this is even with creating art, and something I've really had to try to learn to ground into my comfort of not needing to create to gain something. Would I do what I'm doing anyways, even if I'm not getting something from it? Of any type of art, to make sure I'm not creating something because somebody else will like it. Or, of course, if it is only a financial gain or something, right? But this is to make sure that we're not, you know, even seeking enlightenment or information or more knowledge to further us or what we think is going to, because we can wind up in some traps. And I'm going to get to that part as well. To finish this paragraph I was at, it says, back to, but one must not do these things for any ulterior purpose. One should do them because it is the wise thing, the right thing to do. One should do them out of a spirit of compassion, as a mother does things for her little child, for her sick child, with no thought of her own strength or comfort. Suppose a man goes to the forest to get some of the pith that grows in the center of the tree and returns with a burden of branches and leaves, thinking that he has secured what he went after. Would he not be foolish if he is satisfied with the bark, endoderm, or wood for the pith which he was after? But that is what many people are doing. A person seeks a path that will lead him away from birth, old age, sickness, and death, or from lamentation, sorrow, suffering, and pain, and yet he follows the path a little way and notices some little advance and immediately becomes proud and conceited and domineering. He is like the man who sought pith and went away satisfied with a burden of branches and leaves. And I hadn't read that before I was reading it to you guys. So that goes along with the obedience, as well. If we're going after or putting our energy or creating things that we were not called to do, this will also, this can also be a cause of building not solid foundations. These are the foundations that are first to get swept away. Also, what it really comes down to is conditional love versus unconditional love, conditional creation versus unconditional creation. When we are giving and expecting something in return, or to see a response at all, or to become happy or feel validated once we see one, all this is all conditional, which means we are putting limitations on our art, on our love, on our dreams. And then getting into taking paths that we wind up deceived as well. It says, once there was a king who loved his people and his country and ruled them with wisdom and kindness, and because of it, his country was prosperous and peaceful. He was always seeking for greater wisdom and enlightenment. He even offered rewards to anyone who could lead him to worthy teachings. His devotion and wisdom finally came to the attention of the gods, but they determined to test him. A god in disguise as a demon appeared before the gates of the king's palace and asked to be brought before the king, as he had a holy teaching for him. So it was a demon disguised as a god, or a god disguised as a demon. The king, who was pleased to hear the message, courteously received him and asked for instruction. The demon took on a dreadful form and demanded food, saying that he could not teach until he had the food he liked. Choice food was offered to the demon, but he insisted that he must have warm flesh and blood, human. The crown prince gave his body, and the queen also gave her body, but still the demon was unsatisfied, and so demanded the body of the king. The king expressed his willingness to give his body, but asked that he might first hear the teaching before he would offer his body. The god uttered the following wise teaching: Lamentation rises from lust, and fear rises from lust. Those who remove lust have no lamentation or fear. Suddenly the god resumed his true form, and the prince and the queen also appeared in their original bodies. Once there was a seeker of the true path in the Himalayas. He cared nothing for all the treasures of the earth or even for all the delights of heaven, but he sought the teaching that would remove all mental delusions. The gods were impressed by the man's earnestness and sincerity and decided to test his mind. So one of the gods disguised himself as a demon and appeared in the Himalayas singing, "Everything changes, everything appears and disappears." The seeker heard this song, which pleased him very much. He was so delighted as if he had found a spring of cool water for his thirst, or as if a slave had been unexpectedly set free. He said to himself, "At last I have found the true teaching that I have sought for so long." He followed the voice and at last came upon the frightful demon. With an uneasy mind, he approached the demon and said, "Was it you who sang the holy song that I have just heard? If it was you, please sing more of it." The demon replied, "Yes, it was my song, but I cannot sing more of it until I have had something to eat. I am starving." The man begged him earnestly to sing more of it, saying, "It has a sacred meaning to me, and I have sought its teaching for a long time. I have only heard a part of it. Please let me hear more." The demon said again, "I am starving, but if I can taste the warm flesh and blood of a man, I will finish the song." The man, in his eagerness to hear the teaching, promised the demon that he could have his body after he had heard the teaching. Then the demon sang the complete song. Everything changes, everything appears and disappears. There is perfect tranquility when one transcends both life and extinction. Hearing this, the man, after he wrote the poem on rocks and trees around, quietly climbed the tree and hurled himself down at the feet of the demon. But the demon had disappeared, and instead a radiant God received the body of the man unharmed. And there are quite a few stories in this book of many different ways that one can sell themselves out for anything. But a lot of this, of course, is talking about for enlightenment, to receive light, which is information in some way or another, as opposed to releasing that ego mind, trying to fulfill the physical instead of the spirit, when we're trying to reach our desires instead of being obedient and what is right in front of us right now that's important, and allowing the rest to come. When we are more determined to attain and to build ourselves, our life, our anything, instead of giving from the heart, because that comes on its own when we are truly here to give instead of trying to collect, trying to build in the physical before, of course, the spiritual and in our heart. I will read one more short example from these chapters from this book. Once upon a time, there was an earnest seeker of the true path named, I'm just going to say Sada for short. He cast aside every temptation for profit or honor and sought the path at the risk of his life. One day a voice from heaven came to him, saying, Sada, go straight toward the east. Do not think of either heat or cold. Pay no attention to worldly praise or scorn. Do not be bothered by discriminations of good or evil, but just keep on going east. In the far east, you will find a true teacher and will gain enlightenment. Sada was very pleased to get this definite instruction and immediately started on his journey eastward. Sometimes he pressed on sleeping, where night found him in a lonely field or in the wild mountains. Being a stranger in foreign lands, he suffered many humiliations. Once he sold himself into slavery, selling his own flesh out of hunger, but at least he found the true teacher and asked for his instruction. There is a saying, good things are costly, and Sada found it true in his case, for he had many difficulties on his journey in search of the path. He had no money to buy some flowers and incense to offer the teacher. He tried to sell his services, but could not find anyone to hire him. There seemed to be an evil spirit hindering him every way he turned. The path to enlightenment is a hard one and may cost a man his life. At last, Sada reached the presence of the teacher himself, and then he had a new difficulty. He had no paper on which to take notes and no brush or ink to write with. Then he pricked his wrist and took notes in his own blood. In this way, he secured the precious truth. So, this is about also selling out our dreams and our purpose and what we came here, what we are here doing. I should say it's not just one thing. And again, our purpose is a way of life. It is not only something that we do at certain times when, we're getting something in return. Our purpose is a way of life. And when we lose sight of that and are, willing to lose everything because of the ways of the world and what we see with our eyes, this is truly about not being bothered by that and continuing on with what we came here to do and not throwing it all away and going and, hiding out. Many have been put, of course, in some really, really deep isolation seasons, but sometimes we don't want to come out of that because, the ways of the world, but this is about not being bothered by the ways of the world, not letting that hinder one's true path and, not doing what your heart really wants to do because of it. This is truly about freeing one's own heart and mind from imprisonment or from not imprisoning one's own heart with the mind. This man's story, as well, the one I was speaking of, that was imprisoned in another country for spreading the teachings, his humiliation was huge, where it would make you question, well, if God wants, him to tell people that he loves, that they're loved by him, or he's showing him that people don't know that they're loved by him, you're going to allow somebody that you love to be beaten every day for 9 weeks. And I believe he was the entire time that happened, if I remember. I highly suggest anybody who watches this. Was a really good, beautiful testimony. So if he's so loved, why would you let him hurt like that and be in prison? That's terrifying, right? Well, it is not only the man he shook hands with, it was in the courtroom when they asked him what he was doing, and at first he was terrified to speak. He wasn't. He questioned for a second if he should say that, but he had no fear of doing it at the same time. And he knew exactly what he was doing there, and he said it, and he was not afraid. And he said the whole courtroom felt it. And then not only that, millions of people have heard this story now. So it is not only what is happening to us, to what is happening in the outside world, people thinking that they're getting away with things, people being abusive, people, trying to jail us with their thoughts and beliefs, or maybe, you know, physically, right? So, it's not about that. It's about overcoming that and freeing oneself as well. It was so freeing for this man's heart to be able to evolve past that prison and speak freely in that courtroom that just took him, imprisoned him for saying what he did, you know, but without even telling them. Um, so, you know, his heart grew so far beyond where it was before it happened. And our true, in true Christ, the path of true love and the sun, the way I like to say it, the sun is in the sky, the sun in the heavens, right? The sun passes over every country, every different race, every plant, every animal that it does. And it is not selective in, the sun is not selective in who it is nourishing and giving light to. The sun doesn't say, well, you committed this crime and, you did that back in 1972 and, you've been drinking too much water to this animal and not sharing with the others, so I'm not going to give you light today. The sun is giving light and loves all, and none more than the other. And that is what unconditional love is. That doesn't mean that you support abuse or people that are trying to imprison you, but knowing what you're doing and your purpose here isn't affected by what others are doing, what other people say, what other people say to you, about the truth, about the world. Nothing that anybody, nothing that is happening in the external world, sometimes even being beat down when you're guided to go somewhere, you know, it's about being able to see past that. And in this sense, in his extreme, this was a very extreme humiliation to have this happen to you every day. This is something that is so extreme and severe, it can reach so many people. You know, you know, we can wonder why that would allow him to be beaten, why him being in pain, if God works through everybody and God does, why can't you just speak to them and work through them yourself without somebody having to be hurt because of it? Because that's your purpose here as a teacher. And the people that are causing harm are also teachers and allowing one to expand their heart. It is the cycle of life, the wheel of life. And because of, this is how our, the enemy or the pain and the hardship that we go through, the people that are doing the injustice to the max, this is why they can, and these circumstances can be used to our benefit and to lift us up. Now, of course, if we're contributing to situations and places that we were not guided to, it's not going to be the same. It can be easy to think that in a world of duality, on the duality side, which is the mental side, that's not what the heart is the oneness. If you are in duality, you're thinking, well, being a teacher of love is good, and the people who bring pain and deception or betrayal are bad, and are not teachers of love. But oftentimes, when those things happen, the not seemingly good things, they're teaching us where we do not love ourselves or where we're lacking love in our life and where we're needing that support. This will teach us where we are relying on that sense of support or love or safety or anything that's going to satisfy us when, it shows us where we're seeking the support from others or the world outside of us instead of within. And of course, you know, our heavenly parents. And then, so the book also says they should train their minds and keep them broad as earth, unlimited as the sky, deep as a big river, and soft as a well-tanned leather. Even if your enemy catches and tortures you, if you feel resentment, you are not following the Buddha's teachings. Under every circumstance, you should learn to think, my mind is unshakable. Words of hatred and anger shall not pass my lips. I will surround my enemy with thoughts of sympathy and pity that flow out from a mind filled with compassion for all sentient life. Do not be fooled by false structures. It can appear in the world that people have been doing wrong for a long time have solid structures. And that is not the case. And who's going to be sent to those people when it's time for those structures to fall to show them the truth and love? Somebody will be, and it is probably you. We all have people that are sent into our life when our structures fall to show us, for better or for worse, so it seems. Some people can come in and say a word of love, and sometimes these people come in as tests to see how faulty our structures are. It's the integrity of the structure. And we will build structures for that part of the dream of what needs to be built, and then they will fall when it's time for those structures to fall until they are so solid that they cannot fall. But these structures are truly, truly in spirit. Physical material can fall, disintegrate, deplete at any time. Truly think of the movie Inception, the dream within a dream. This is how we move from one cycle to the next. The material aspect is not important. It is not about that. And this doesn't mean that we cannot have great things. We are meant to build structures. But it is the internal structure that is where the strength is. It is overcoming the structures of the mind and those mind structures that need to be broken down, that are so deeply programmed and ingrained. So if you have had this happen before, you will know. But when you have built a strong structure, or one that felt safe and happy, and it comes crashing down or falls away and suddenly you lose everything, you need to be okay with understanding that it was time for that period to end. And some of us have gone through loss and gain many times. But it is about being unmoved by it. What you are doing is mastering your ability to move freely in between dreams. Also, if you do not know by now, do not be surprised when you are in a period of loss, or you might already be down in some ways, if people that are in your life or come into your life and say the most ridiculous things that should maybe even hurt to get a reaction. And it is a test. It is a real, and it's more than a test. There's more to it. I don't even honestly like using that word test. But is that going to bother you when the person who you already know is trying to hurt you, or has, or does not have good intentions, happens to come into your life, right? And says more humiliating things in a time that you already feel you are, right, going through it. However it is that these tests show up, if we are, it's in some form of imprisonment where maybe something has an upper hand as well, or um, this is truly about breaking free of this prison and having to overcome that as well. If what somebody says or does or thinks, or any actions in the outside world, are having a hold on you, then that's, a form of something else having control over you. This is about breaking free. When that man was being released from this story, he knew he was being released and went into the courtroom. They gave him his clothes back. But the real freedom was not until he spoke the truth and his purpose in the courtroom. There was an extension, an overextension, an expansion beyond just the release. The true freedom was not until he said it with his chest, loud and clear, with no fear. He learned a lot about himself in that one moment, about his entire life and purpose here that day. This is also not being moved when, by your surroundings or by other people, and not seeing them different or lacking integrity when you are on the up. If you've been on the up before, and this can be materially or in spirit, when you get back up or when you are on an up, how are you going to treat those around you when you find yourself in a scenario, environment, or around people who are not on that up, either spiritually or material? Now that you're up, are you going to treat them differently? Are you going to look down on that environment? To have a pure heart is to have a pure mind. And is your mind going to be pure and remain pure regardless of what it is you are facing in the moment? No man or woman is different than the next, and not necessarily because you have so much in common with every person you come across, but we all do have one thing in common, and that is that we are of one consciousness. But this doesn't mean that you're like every person that you come into contact with. I hear that a lot. Everyone's a reflection. Well, not entirely, but we all do have something in common. The thing is do you accept that and the world and people as they are? Because regardless of the situation that you're in, that they're in, the person, who you are, where you're at, where they're at, what they're doing, what you're doing, it is not good or bad. That is the mental, the mind, the duality, the left brain and right brain, where the wars reside. In the heart, we are all one, and the heart must be able to expand around those beliefs and break those structures down. Everyone is living in the nature of who they are and their way of expression, regardless of what the next person thinks or feels about it. If it is good or bad or right or wrong. As you know, a lot of my work is with the animal kingdom, and you can take two different animals. You can take a giraffe and a squid. They might not have a lot in common. They are not in the same environment, but that doesn't make one superior than the other. There are a lot of differences between them, but they are all still part of the animal kingdom. You're not going to find the giraffe telling the squid that his purpose is useless or not important because they do not affect or seemingly affect the giraffe. The squid is playing its part. It would not listen to the giraffe if the giraffe said that it's doing it wrong because the giraffe isn't a squid. The giraffe would never say that to the squid, though. The giraffe has the higher picture, the one that can see above what all of the other animals may be able to see. The giraffe is able to take the high road with its head in the clouds, hopefully not too far in the clouds, not getting lost in, finding enlightenment and reaching the path to the heavens. The head is already there, though. It doesn't need to seek further. It's already there. It is really easy to get lost in or, a little off path when seeking too much in other places, in other people, in other things. People want to fill up and to gain, but what they are really seeking is the love of God. And you will find that in the present moment. Throughout much of this recording, it took me a lot to a video I made with giraffe medicine, and the giraffe came in a lot during this, which teaches us about the sun and solar plexus and our head in the sky, from God's view. What God sees and what we see are not the same thing, but not to have the head so high in the clouds that we miss it, because this is about acceptance and accepting what is in front of us in the present moment as what it is. If somebody is abusive, instead of trying to want them to be different or know that they could be different or trying to build foundations off of something that is not meant to be built off of, we need to accept what is and people for who they are and the situation for what it is, instead of trying to alter it to something that we think it's supposed to look like, or being disappointed because it's not. The foundations that are being built are within what you learned and took from that situation to build in the next foundation, to build in the next cycle, to build in the next, opportunity to create from what you learned to do and what not to do. And then the most important part in building these foundations within is not holding on to old foundations of beliefs that we took on after a certain experience or something we learned or saw or something we read about, knowledge, information that we are building a belief system off of that was never true in the first place.